pleased to have two contributors joined us today to talk specifically about their work. So Jan Mitchison's going to speak to us first. For those of you who have experienced how to argue better, I know a number of practitioners in the room have been on training. Well, if you enjoyed How to Argue Better, then you can thank Jan for that. Jan is a teacher, she's a practice innovator, worked for 13 years as a health visitor in Northumberland before joining 1+1 over 10 years ago. Her work is mainly focused on family, couple relationships, and has led a number of successful programmes, 1+1, and also as an associate 1+1. She's also sort of worked with us in Hartlepool. We've been really pleased that Jan came up and worked with us at the back end of last year to think about this seminar and this conference today, and to think about what kind of resources that might be useful for practitioners working on the front line. So the goodie bag that you've got, a lot of the resources in there are based on the work that Jan has produced over the years. So I'm delighted that she's here with us today to share some of that background evidence. Following Jan, we'll then have Marie Huscroft, who's joined us from Newcastle, who has been operating as a health visitor and as a relationship navigator, actually doing the doing. So she will talk to us about it can be done, and this is how.
So hello, my name is Marie Huscroft, and I am a health visitor in Newcastle upon Tyne. And in the last year, I'm currently coming to the end of a secondment as a relationship navigator, which I always think is a bit of a funny title, as if I watched some 80s movie or something. So what happened in Newcastle is that Newcastle were part of the local family offer, and they commissioned Relate to deliver some couples counselling for families in Newcastle, which would be available for free for families. What they identified within the first year is that they received no referrals at all from midwives or from health visitors. So they looked at that and identified that actually this was somewhere that they could invest some money, and that's where my role came from. So my role over the last year has been to increase awareness and confidence in the identification and response to interpretal conflict within the 0 to 19 service as a whole. So the work I talk about this morning is particularly kind of around the under 5, so the health visiting, but I have been working with the 0 to 19, so the school nurses as well. My role would also be to provide some case consultancy to frontline staff, and also to provide training, so the How to Argue Better. So I've been working over the last year to deliver the How to Argue Better as many 0 to 19 staff as possible. The training that I have delivered, I've got to say, has been really well attended, prioritised by staff, which is really difficult in times when we haven't got a lot of time for taking full days out for training, and it's been really well evaluated. So all the evaluations that have come back have identified that their knowledge maybe would be medium to low, but it was actually by the time they'd done the training it was much higher. So in my role as a relationship navigator, came into post, I've been a health visitor for about 13 years before that, so my first steps were to attend How to Argue Better training. So as a practitioner, I attended a Reducing Parental Conflict conference, and obviously lots of reading and research. And to be honest, the How to Argue Better training, as Jan spoke this morning, was just a light bulb moment for me, that absolutely this was part of a health visitor's role. We were clearly in a place to be able to identify, to talk about couple relationships, so that families are aware that, that people will talk about couple relationships, that are happy with that. But also, as a way of we talk a lot about how do we involve fathers, but what better way to start than when you're pregnant or you've got a new baby, somebody actually talking to you as a couple, as parents together. So for me, this was an absolute light bulb moment. So after that, I went out and just went to anybody who would listen to me really, went to our practice development forums, went to our team meetings, talked about the learning that I had and that the training that would be coming up. And also took that wider into the community family hubs, so our partners, and also teams within social work, and also within the hospital social work team. As I say, anybody that would kind of let us in and listen to us really. So I just wanted to share with you, just on the back of what Jan's been talking about, is the case study. So this was one of my families. So my role, I've been working 2 days a week, but also 2 days a week still into caseload as well. So I'd done my How to Do Better training, felt armed with my toolkit and everything, with my new knowledge, and was actually working within my caseload, within my baby clinic. So this is a family that was well known to me. I'd met them antenatally, had done all their routine checks that we do as health visitors, and she came into baby clinic. The baby was 9 months old, and this family also have a 10-year-old daughter, but the parents have been together in a long-term relationship. No issues before now. So Mum came to baby clinic and came in really anxious, talking about sleep. Baby wasn't sleeping, breastfeeding all the time, constipated, really worried. And this was really unusual behaviour for her. And I think for me it just took one question just to say, or one comment to say, it looks like you're really stressed out at the moment. You know, I'm just wondering what's going on. It was just one question, one open question like that. And Mum instantly just broke down and started to cry and say that her and her partner weren't getting on and actually going to stay at his mum's house for a little while. So in the middle of a busy baby clinic, I planned with Mum to go to the home and follow this up. And in my mind I was thinking this is all about how we use our soluble approach, which is what we use in Newcastle, to really go and talk to the family about what is going on for them at the moment, and obviously with me How to Argue Better model in the handbag ready to go. So the home visit, and actually Dad was present at that home visit as well. What they identified was, for the parents, they were having regular arguments. Dad had moved out to his parents for a break. Both felt that the impact of a new baby after 10 years had really affected their communication and their relationship. Mum actually said that she had low mood and had actually resumed smoking with stress. So if we're thinking about all those health impacts, physical and emotional for both parents, you can just see them ticking quite a lot of the boxes. For the children, the baby had become more clingy, was constipated, poor sleep patterns, sleeping in the parents' bed or Mum's bed, and the 10-year-old had started to spend more time in a bedroom and at her grandmother's house to keep up with the rain. So again, opening up that conversation, actually for them, it was about, first of all, looking at where they were. So this was just one of the tools that I used, just to show them that actually it's normal for relationships not to be the same all the time. It's normal for things to get difficult, and for actually that we move through, and I always refer to this as an escalator. So we move through this escalator. We might start off at the romance where it's all lovely, we go into the reality, and then we get into power struggles, and particularly around about around when stress happens. And then after that we go off and find ourselves. The parents quickly, and every time I use this really amazes me how quickly people will identify with this. And what Dad identified was that he felt that they had been at the mutual respect, love and understanding, but actually that's where they should have stayed. That's when, now that the baby's come along, that, because they fell off that, then that was it. Whereas Mum understood that, and she recognised that they were currently in power struggle. So for them it was just that opening up of actually it was okay for things not to be right and okay for things to change. I then used this tool with the family as well. They were telling me all the issues that they were arguing about, and it was, as John said, it was all the top 5, the sex, the communication, the children, the household chores. And what I use this and how I use it with families is I actually just cover up the bottom bit first and just say, well, these are the things that you're talking about. And then but actually these are some of the deeper things that might be going on for you. I wonder if you can identify with any of that. And Dad quickly felt that there'd been a lot less acceptance of him, and they'd lost some of that affection, and that was what he was really missing. And Mum identified that for her it was a recognition that she was a parent again, she was working hard, and he wasn't really recognising that had affected their communication. So again, it's the pictorial use of it. It's actually saying, I can see what's happening here, but what do you think's happening for you? Which then helped me to show them and identify with them that this is the vicious cycle that they were in. So a lot of their arguments were about housework, were about chores, And so it was able to see that Mum was being critical of Dad about the chores, which was ending up in high levels of conflict. He was feeling dissatisfied and actually was less involved. And he reported that this time with this baby he felt less involved, but he attributed that to Mum breastfeeding. But he'd actually taken a big step out. So again, for him, this was a time where he really identified that they were actually stuck in this cycle, and so did Mum. And again, we used this tool as well just for them. For them, they knew about each other, they knew about each other's past, they'd been in a relationship for a long time. But I actually used this tool to get them to think about each other's strengths. Where are their strengths with each other? And the strengths they identified were that, yeah, they'd been together a long time, that they were funny, that they loved each other, and they identified quite a lot of strengths in each other, but they kind of needed someone to help them be reminded of that. And that the stressful stuff for them was that after 10 years they'd had another baby. So life was, they knew where they were at, they knew they were in good routines, they were both in work, and the new baby coming along had just really disrupted where they were at in their relationship. And again, it just helped them to identify that they could see the impact of their children, and they identified that they could see that their daughter was spending a bit more time in the room and a bit more time at grandma's, and that baby was unsettled. So again, as Jan says, it's just sometimes about getting families to realise where they're at that helps them to move forward. So again, what all that led to is just some solution-focused questions about asking them to think about what steps were they going to take, what tiny little steps could they take to try to make things a little bit better. And all they identified was that actually they needed a bit of time for themselves, with no pressures, and that's what they identified and that's what they worked on. So they arranged childcare with the grandmother, and again that was no suggestion that came from me, I made no suggestions, they identified that that's what they needed. They arranged for grandma to look after the children, and they ended up having time together, which then helped them to communicate, and Dad eventually moved back home. And as far as I'm aware, they're still together. And then once they've got back together, they themselves established a bedtime routine for the baby, and also and the constipation that the baby was experiencing just resolved itself. So I think for me, for that family, it was about when that lady came to baby clinic that day, I could have quite easily launched into a whole lot of advice about how we were going to manage this baby's constipation, how would we manage, what are you going to do about the sleep. I could offer advice about sleep programs, but just that one question, that key question about what actually is you struggling, what's happening, and actually talking about the relationship is what made a difference for them. I didn't have to do a lot of work about sleep programs or constipation or anything like that. And had they not had that early intervention, had they not had that support early on, then as Jan has put on before, who knows what the impact could have been in the longer term if that conflict had been just allowed to continue to spiral. So that's all great. That was really good. I'm really happy about this How to Argue Better. I could see how it works. So in my navigator role, I'm also have supported staff members within our service. So I just wanted to quickly share a reflection with you as well about how when it doesn't go so well, how when you open that can of worms and you think, oh my goodness, what have I done? So this was a health visitor contacted me in the service to ask for some support. Parents were arguing regularly. Police had been called previously regarding their arguments, and issues were identified about paternal mental health and his alcohol use. Mum was low in mood postnatally, and she was receiving support from our new PIP programme, which is focusing on that parent-infant relationship. So again, I visited with the health visitor, and we used the How to Argue Better model. We used our solical approach and all those good active listening skills that we have to explore the relationship. And oh my goodness, this couple launched into a big argument in front of us, and it was that moment of being brave. And I'm afraid that during that conversation there was a little bit of kind of, please just hand up, please just sit down, please just. But what really, really helped in that situation was the How to Argue Better tools. It's actually being able to say, look, can we just look at this? And it just made them focus in, and I think the spiral that Jan showed you, that was the main thing that I kind of used with them to say, can you see, this is where you're at, you're criticising each other, and the more of this that you do, the more you're going down. Whereas I say, it was having the model, it was having the tools actually there in our hands that enabled us. So after that difficult visit, the second visit really showed good improvements that worked on them. They identified for their little step was just that they just weren't going to swear at each other. And they had an argument, they weren't going to swear. That was their first little step, and take a deep breath. Second visit showed improvement, that seemed to work really well. Dad actually apologised and said he'd apologised to Mum, and me and the health visitor that was working with us was like, oh, great, how to argue better's really working. Third visit, again, severe breakdown, lots of please, can we just calm it down? But actually in that third visit, what they then displayed to us that there was more to this. They were actually being really quite abusive to each other. But they actually told us that quite clearly, what was actually going on in their relationship. And unfortunately we had to refer that to student social care for further assessment. But again, my reflection on that when I came out was like, oh my goodness, what have we done? We have opened up this kind of worms. I can't believe this family have just played their relationship out to us. But the health visitor turned to me and says, do you know, Marie, I've been working with that family for over a year, because obviously the baby was 18 months old, and we knew something was going on, but we couldn't get to the bottom of what. And I think for me that was the key learning point, that by actually talking to this couple about their relationship, identified what was really going on. And yes, it was more abusive than the high-level parental conflict, but actually just by having that conversation, it opened that up, and we were able to get the support in for that family that was needed, and escalate it. And then finally, this was a little bit experimental on our part. So in Newcastle, How to Argue Better training, we've delivered multi-agency, so as many staff out there as possible on the front line are delivered in How to Argue Better. And I think that's really good, because from a universal services point of view, we can deliver that first level intervention, but if we know somebody needs a bit more intensive support, we can put that into our early help, into the community family hubs, and get that more intensive support as well. So myself and a colleague from one of the community family hubs, she was running a group over Christmas about money and managing finances over Christmas, and really wanted a relationship part of it as well. So we went to the group and just done some of the activities with the group from the How to Argue Better, just looking at conflict styles and everything. And this was some of the, and it went down really well. As I say, it was the first time we'd both done it, so we didn't really know what it would, but the parents really engaged with it really well, and actually the quieter parents, you could see, were listening to what the other parents were saying and really taking that on board. So this is some of the reflections that we got from that, which I think, to be honest, just really speaks volumes. And again, even if it's just that little change. I'm not So in Newcastle, we now have 90 practitioners from our 0 to 19 service trained in How to Argue Better. We have about 140 in the service, so I think I'm not doing too bad. And all evaluations from this service has been phenomenal, and as I say, really positive. We've had no negative feedback from it at all. And we've got, as I said, we've got the multi-agency response, and also now within Newcastle, discussion and assessment regarding couple relationships is embedded into our record keeping. So therefore that means that practitioners, health visitors are prompted at all routine Healthy Child Programme contacts are prompted to explore and discuss the couple parental relationship, which means before that a child's 2, that should have occurred kind of at least 5 times. I'm currently in the progress of developing a package of care for the 0 to 19 service, so we've got clear boundaries and a clear package of care, how we support using the How to Argue Better tool. And anecdotal evidence has come through as well to say that there has been an increased referral rate to the specialist service rate, and staff are already aware of the upcoming new contract package, so that when that's available to refer to, staff have already got that awareness. And should be able to roll that out and get those referrals in. So for me, it's just as it says in the book, is to for all practitioners just to be brave and to recognise, and when somebody comes with one issue, it isn't necessarily that that's what the issue is, that it's something wider, and it could be a couple. So to recognise, be brave enough to respond to it, even if that, as Jan says, is just a 10-minute conversation, but at least you've responded, and give that recognition to what's happening for that family. And obviously the review, so if we've got specialist services, to make that referral when possible. And that's just some information. Is anybody?
I think thank you very much.